Welcome to the Entertainment Hub for another movie recap. Climate change, deforestation, and nuclear war will have caused so much harm to Earth in the near future that most cities all over the world will crumble. There is a power and food deficit, as well as a deadly lack of oxygen. By 2067, one of the few remaining cities is in Australia, which has survived thanks to synthetic oxygen. However, this oxygen is polluted, causing individuals to become ill with the sickness. Ethan White and his best friend Jude labor as utility workers to keep the neutral reactor maintained and restore power to the city. After the workday is done, their boss scans them to ensure that everyone is okay. When one of the workers says he won't be able to work the next day, Ethan takes his place to earn extra oxygen credits. Nonetheless, the boss fires the unfortunate man. Ethan was on his way home when observed a protester stating that oxygen is not a privilege and that they must make sacrifices for future generations. While passers-by ignore him, Ethan is challenged by the fired worker, who is desperate for work since his children are infected with the sickness. And debate ensues, only to be cut short as the protester catches fire. Later that night, Ethan learns via the news that the protester did this to memorialize the death of the last surviving plant. The report also notes the growing number of deaths caused by the sickness and how chronicle, an oxygen generator, promises to discover a remedy. The reporter then begins talking about the chronicle's late senior scientist, Ethan's father Richard, which drives him to turn off the TV. When Ethan's wife Xanthi arrives, he gives her a new oxygen mask. As they play, Xanthi vomits blood because she has the sickness, but she convinces Ethan that she is okay. Later, Ethan is summoned to the offices of Crony Cops, and Jude joins him. They meet Regina, the company's chief technology officer, who tells them that Ethan can assist them to saving humanity. It turns out they're working on the Chronicle, a time machine built by Richard 20 years ago. They've been testing it for a few minutes by sending a clock, but they've also sent radio waves and received a reply from 400 years in the future with the words, "Send Ethan White." Regina believes that people from the future have discovered a cure for the sickness and will only deliver it to Ethan. The crew doesn't know how to bring Ethan back, so he'll have to track down the folks who delivered the message in order to return. Following the meeting, Ethan and Jude head to a bar to discuss Regina's proposal. Ethan is reluctant to leave Xanthi, but Jude tells out that staying would mean Xanthi dying, whereas leaving would mean saving her for years to come. When Jude brings up Richard, Ethan tells him that his father vanished, leaving his 8-year-old son with nothing but a self-destruct note and a strange device on his wrist. Ethan believes that if Richard had been present, his mother would not have died, thus he refuses to do the same to Xanthi. However, Jude believes that in order to avoid being like Richard, Ethan must save Xanthi. Ethan considers his 8th birthday after Jude departs. He had waited all day for his father, but Richard was late, and his present was a strange box. He put young Ethan's hand into the box, telling him he'd have to make a difficult decision eventually, and then an electronic bracelet tightened around his wrist, forcing it to bleed. Richard told the youngster that the bracelet would not come off and left the house, ignoring his wife's protests. Then, recalling his mother's death, Ethan resolves to return home to inform Xanthi about Chronicorp's plot. He doesn't want to leave her, but Xanthi begs him not to use her as a reason to postpone helping humanity and to believe. She also lists all of the students in her class who have died, expressing her fear. Later that evening, Ethan walks to the roof to observe the city, feverishly attempting to remove the bracelet as he recalls the day his mother died on the streets. Jude discovered him that day and shared his oxygen mask with him. Ethan yells in the present as he makes his decision. The next morning, Ethan leaves a metal flower for Xanthi and promises to return, unaware that she is awake and crying. When he arrives at the Crony Cop's office, he strikes a deal with Regina. He won't leave until Xanthi receives the first dose of the treatment. Regina agrees, and they rush to the lab, where the experts show Ethan how to use the unique suit and Archie, a little pocket computer. Jude also shows up to show his support, pledging to keep an eye on Xanthi. When Ethan is ready, he climbs into the machine, and electricity wraps around his body until the machine fires a pulse of energy, transporting him into the future. A hole appears in the sky, and Ethan falls with incredible speed until he crashes in the middle of a jungle, where he immediately faints. When Ethan awakens, he discovers his suit is on fire and runs away. Crawls away from it just before it explodes and pulls it off. Ethan uses Archie to verify his location after admiring nature for a time, but Archie is unable to connect to any satellite. He eventually releases a magnet into the Earth, allowing Archie to detect adjacent structures and guiding him to the nearest facility. Ethan is astonished to find a skeleton with a hole in the head at the door, but the true shock comes when he notices the skeleton is wearing the suit with his name on it. He also discovers a rusting Archie beneath the leaves, as well as Richard's bracelet on the skeleton's wrist. However, this one has a green light. This indicates he's going to die on this expedition, which causes him to panic. After calming down, he attempts to unlock the facility's doors but is unsuccessful. Thus instead, he requests that the rusty Archie play the last tape. The machine plays a distorted voice claiming it's better this way because no one suffers, followed by two voices arguing and a gunshot. The battery dies at that point, and the rusting Archie shuts off. Then he discovers a wire wrapped around the rusting Archie, so Ethan gets some wire from his suit and wraps it around his own Archie, allowing her to detect a beacon signal for the first time. Ethan follows the signal across the jungle and discovers two oxygen dispensers but no one. Later that evening, with Archie's assistance, Ethan builds a fire, albeit it takes him a long. He also discovers some berries that Archie cannot identify, so Ethan eats one and throws the rest away since they taste terrible. Following that, Ethan asks Archie to use the constellations to confirm the year 2474, which reminds him of how he and Richard used to stare at the skies together. However, the recollection abruptly ends when Richard begins to feel ill, puking, and hallucinating while a rainstorm sweeps through the neighborhood. As his hallucinations worsen, Ethan sees a ball of light crash near his camp and spots a man racing toward him to stab him in the chest. Ethan goes out, and when he wakes up, the strange man is Jude, who injected him with medicine to treat the poison. The next morning, Jude says that Chronicle was tracking Ethan's vitals and discovered he was dying, so they utilized the Chronicle's remaining power to dispatch Jude for assistance. Ethan shows Jude the skeleton, but Jude is skeptical that it is Ethan. They then use Archie to continue tracking the signal until they discover another facility that scans Ethan's eye and promptly opens the door. Except for a flashing panel with Ethan's name on it, the interior is pitch black. When he pushes enter, the bracelet on his wrist activates and draws blood for DNA analysis. The light on the bracelet suddenly turns green, and the computer turns on the lights now that Ethan's identity has been validated. The pair is surprised to find themselves at Chronicle's lab, and the computer says that the portal will open in 4 hours. Jude is relieved, but Ethan is concerned since his bracelet is the same color as the skeleton's. Next, Ethan examines the computer logs and discovers a holographic recording made by Richard during his time at Chronicle. They buried a monitoring station that would send data from the future when the air became breathable, according to Richard. The crew was expecting a response from 2474 in the next entry, but all they got was the phrase, "Send Ethan White." Regina requested if they could convey the matter now, but the report stated that there was a power outage in 2474. The lab system abruptly shuts down, and the computer notifies Ethan to a problem with the nuclear core power. Ethan orders Archie to do a diagnostic, and they discover that the power feed is contaminated, preventing them from returning to 2067. The computer also tells them that if they do not resolve the problem before the countdown concludes, a nuclear explosion will occur. Then Jude insists on working on the repairs, but Ethan wants to assess their position first, which almost drives Jude to become confrontational. Jude calms Ethan down and encourages him to recognize how serious the problem is, so Ethan agrees to go to the access tunnel for repairs as long as they look for the sender of the message afterwards. The pair travels through the forest to the city, only to find it in ruins and overgrown with plants. As they investigate the region, they discover several skeletons, and Ethan discovers that no one survived the year he came from. The Earth just waited for mankind to perish before replenishing itself. Ethan recalls the night Richard summoned them to a location, but they were pursued by a stranger who murdered his mother and took Ethan's breathing mask. Richard never showed up, but Jude located and saved Ethan. Ethan has a panic attack as a result of the flashback, but Jude helps him calm down. Ethan sobs and laments, leaving Xanthi alone, still believing they will be powerless to do anything. When the couple returns to the lab, they discover that they only have 37 minutes before the portal launches. Ethan unexpectedly unlocks a door and realizes it leads to his bones, forcing him to recognize that he cannot change fate. Ethan, distraught, leaps on Jude, accusing him of using him all these years, and another dispute follows about how to proceed. Ethan begins to yank cables in an attempt to stop the Chronicle, so Jude assaults him, slamming him against the wall while begging him to fight. Since Ethan refuses, Jude pulls out his revolver and points it at Ethan's head, but Ethan does not fight back, claiming he trusts in his brother. Regina is preparing the elite group for their escape in the present, and she instructs a guard to kill Ethan as soon as they arrive in the future. Regina waits for the countdown to end, but instead of a gateway opening, the chronicle closes. Inside the machine, they discover Ethan's present of a bunch of plants, a can, and a film of Richard's murder. The future, Ethan destroys the chronicle so that it would never be used again. Soon, newscasts in the present will highlight Regina's arrest and how scientists are collaborating with plants to begin ecological restoration. Ethan buries Jude's body along the river, leaving the metal flower on the grave. When he notices a butterfly nearby, he recalls his father teaching him that everything in the universe is related through time, and he hurries back to the facility to discover his skeleton is missing. Excited about the potential improvements, Ethan runs through the forest again to reach the city, where he learns humanity has survived and built buildings that fit in with nature.
Make sure to subscribe and turn on notification, so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.